In the previous episode, we started from absolutely nothing with empty hands. All around us was nothing but forest, and my mission was to build a successful logging company. But there's one catch. I only have 2 years to do it. If you're interested, subscribe and let's get started. Waking up on an April morning, the first thing I had to do was replenish our wood supply for production. While we were resting, all the raw material had already been used up. So without wasting any time, I immediately set out to cut down trees. I decided to head to the right of our farm, toward the area where we could later build new production buildings. Let's get to work. I decided to cut down a large number of trees at once. Of course, I first trimmed off all the branches, then sawed them into logs. After that, using a tractor with a front loader, I began transporting them to our production facility. In the end, I managed to gather a small pile of wood. I think it's enough to start the process. I loaded the logs into the production facility and started the operation. Now our wood is being processed into firewood. We continued delivering a new batch, but during one of the lifts, one of the logs turned out to be too heavy and the tractor started losing balance. That's when I realized it was time to buy a counterweight. I got into the pickup truck and drove to the store, where I began looking for a suitable option. My attention was drawn to a barrel filled with some heavy material. It weighed 600 kilograms. I decided that should be enough and bought it, asking for it to be loaded directly into the pickup. After securing the counterweight properly, I headed back to the farm. Upon arrival, I got into the tractor and, using my loader skills, carefully grabbed the barrel with the grabber and lowered it to the ground. Then I turned around and attached the counterweight to the tractor. Now it was time to see how effective the weight would be. As soon as I began lifting another log, it became clear the counterweight was doing a great job. Of course, with particularly heavy logs, the tractor still tilts slightly, but now it's no longer a serious issue and I can handle it. I continued loading the wood into the production facility. After a while, I managed to cut down another large pile of logs, and as a result, the area of our farm significantly expanded. In addition, a few sacks of processed firewood had already appeared at the product output point. A great sign. I loaded them into the production cycle and saw that the storage now contained 27,000 liters of wood. However, it was still not enough. The firewood processor was only 1/4 full. Since I want to fill it completely, I kept cutting down trees. By the end of the day, a massive pile of wood had accumulated on the farm's territory. Because of this, the area of the farm expanded even further. And this started to worry me a little. If this continues, we risk cutting down most of the forest, and I'd rather avoid that. For now, I needed to finish the current batch. Some of the logs had missed the intake area, and I had to adjust them with the tractor. After that, I parked the tractor back in its place since we wouldn't be needing it anymore today. Then I checked the production menu and saw that the storage was now more than half full. That was excellent news. Of course, I wanted to fill it completely, but it was already getting dark outside, so I decided it was time to rest. After parking the vehicle, I headed off to relax. Waking up the next morning, I immediately headed to our production facility and saw that the firewood storage was already full. Since there was no space to store new batches, production had stopped. To avoid wasting time, I had to empty it urgently. In other words, sell all the firewood that had already been produced. I got into our pickup truck, loaded the first batch into it, then hooked up the trailer and filled it completely as well. After securing the load properly, I headed to the selling point. I sold several such batches, and in the end, our balance increased. We now had just over $38,000 in the account. On the way back home, I decided to stop by Ted's place. He told me some interesting news. One of his trucks, which was hauling timber from the mountains, had lost control and gone off the road. The truck was quite old, and according to him, it wasn't worth recovering anymore. So he made me an offer. If I could pull it out, I could keep it. That offer seemed very appealing to me. We had practically nothing to lose, and the truck would definitely come in handy in the future. So I decided that on my way back to the farm, I would stop by and check out the accident site. When I arrived at the site, I saw that everything was exactly as Ted had described. The truck was indeed stuck between two trees and was fully loaded with logs. That made the task much more difficult. Pulling it out wouldn't be easy. After inspecting the area, I drove back to our farm, got into the tractor, and headed back to the crash site. On the way, I stopped at the store. We were definitely going to need a winch. In the end, I bought a forestry winch for the tractor and continued towards the truck. Upon arrival, the first thing I needed to do was completely unload the trailer so nothing would get in the way while flipping the truck. Using the front loader, I carefully lifted the logs and stacked them in one place. The whole process took about an hour. Then I moved on to the next step, cutting down the trees that were blocking the truck. To avoid damaging the equipment, I drove the tractor deeper into the forest and anchored the winch to the nearest tree to prevent it from shifting. I attached the winch cable to one of the trees and tightened it slightly to make it fall in the right direction. Then I started cutting it down. The winch worked perfectly. The tree fell gently away from the truck. I cleared the remaining stump and moved on to the second tree. I managed to take that one down without the winch, but since it fell onto the road, I quickly dragged it deeper into the forest. Now that nothing was in the way, I could begin flipping the truck. At first, I tried using the winch, but the cable wouldn't stay attached. Then I used the loader. I tried lifting the truck from below, but the grip kept slipping off, so I decided to apply pressure from above, and that worked. The truck flipped upright. I got into the driver's seat and tried starting it. To my surprise, the engine started, but then immediately stalled. I tried several more times, and each time the engine ran for only a few seconds. Nevertheless, I managed to pull the truck onto the road and carefully parked it on the roadside. The tractor was no longer needed, so I took it back to the farm. The only thing left was figuring out how to get the truck to the repair shop. I decided to buy a flatbed trailer that could be attached to our pickup truck. Back at the farm, I first checked on the production status, then got into the pickup and drove to the store. There, I picked out a large enough platform and hoped our pickup could handle it. After hooking up the trailer, I headed to the crash site. As I approached the truck, I realized that turning around with such a long trailer would be tricky, so I drove a bit farther, found a suitable spot, and carefully turned around. Then I backed up to the truck, lined up the trailer, and prepared the platform for loading. First, I had to detach the trailer from the truck. Both wouldn't fit on the platform. After that, I got into the truck and slowly drove it onto the flatbed, then secured it with straps. Now I could head to the repair shop. I drove very cautiously. The truck was heavy, and near the end of the trip, it began to shift slightly. But fortunately, I managed to deliver it in one piece. Carefully unloading it from the platform, I moved the pickup aside and began inspecting the damage. The repair cost came out to just over $16,000. But now we had a fully functional truck, something that will definitely come in handy on the farm. After the repair, I got into the truck and drove to pick up the trailer, which was still by the roadside. The truck wasn't very fast, and due to its poor suspension, it shook a lot. Now it became clear why it had gone off the road. But despite that, we got it for only $16,000. A great deal for such a vehicle. On top of that, we also got a pretty large log trailer with it. I hooked it up, transported all the equipment back to the farm, and then brought the pickup home as well. It had been a very eventful day. We got new equipment, and we fully stocked our production. So I decided that was enough for the day, time to get some rest. The next morning, I noticed that our firewood processor was once again completely full. So the first thing I had to do was sell all the produced goods. I also decided it was time to sell the old trailer. Now we could transport the sacks using the new platform, which is much more spacious. So I drove to the store and sold it. After that, I got to work. It took quite a while, but in the end, our account balance reached just over $29,000. With that money, I decided to build a new shelter on our farm. Since the old parking area was no longer sufficient, all the equipment simply didn't fit under it anymore. With the remaining funds, I went to the repair station to restore our trailer, which had become quite worn out. The day was coming to an end, and I had to wait for a new batch of products at the production facility, so I decided that was enough for today. Time to rest. The next day, I once again got to work transporting and selling firewood. The production facility was full again, so the storage needed to be cleared urgently. I managed to earn nearly $38,000, and with that money, I decided to build 2 more wood-to-firewood production units. I placed them closer to the forest, so we wouldn't have to haul the logs too far. I'm also considering relocating the old production facility closer to the new ones, or even selling it altogether. It all depends on how much income the new ones will generate. After that, I began loading the new facilities. After cutting and transporting the first few trees, I remembered that we had recently purchased a winch, and with it, we could transport entire logs without sawing them, which should significantly speed up the process. When I tried this method for the first time, the result turned out to be a little better, but still better. We started filling the production units more quickly. By evening, both new facilities were about halfway full. I immediately launched them and enabled automatic selling mode. Yes, it slightly reduces the profit, but it saves time and eliminates the need to drive to the selling point. However, I then noticed another problem. Firewood production consumes too much wood. At this rate, we could cut down the entire forest fairly quickly. So in the near future, I'll need to think about what else we can do, something more profitable that requires fewer resources. With those thoughts, I wrapped up the day and went to rest. The next day, thanks to firewood sales, our account balance reached nearly $93,000, already quite a significant amount for us. I also decided to sell all the bags of firewood that were sitting in storage. After that, I took a break to wait for the funds to grow even more, and by the very next day, our balance had reached nearly $190,000. I decided it was time to sell our old firewood production unit, since it was located in the center of the farm and was getting in the way. Now, it was possible to invest the money into building a large sawmill. As a result, we now have a new large-scale production facility that, I'm sure, will generate solid income. With that, I decided to wrap things up. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.